It's the Full Force Movie News Burst, brought to you by GeneralsJoes with me, Christopher McLeod AKA Diagnostic 80. Joining me to discuss a number of stories from the past few weeks regarding the upcoming G.I. Joe Transformers crossover movie is the General himself, Justin GeneralsJoes Bell. Hey! The magic of editing. Justin, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, Chris. How you doing? Long time no talk.
Yeah, good to have you back on again. We've got a lot of stories to get through.
Absolutely. That's what happens when you only record once every few months. You actually have some stuff to talk about, right?
That is true, yeah. We've got some good stuff to get into, though. We've got all sorts of things, from a new writer on the crossover film. We've got Chris Hemsworth popping up again. Lorenzo de Bonaventura has been in a bit of hot water as well, but we'll get into all of that.
Not hot enough.
Delicately, though, we'll probably touch on that one. Anyway, loads to talk about, loads to discuss. Let's get stuck into it. Right then, lots to get into, starting with the oldest story here. Back in June, The Wrap reported that Derek Connolly had been tapped up to write the Transformers and G.I. Joe crossover movie. Derek's resume is actually quite promising when you get stuck into it. Kong Skull Island was a solid movie that I have been known to go back and watch again from time to time. Detective Pikachu, which was far more fun than it really had any right to be, as well as co-writing credits on a much better Star Wars Episode 9 than we ended up getting, and Jurassic World, which made $1.67 billion worldwide at Universal. Connolly most recently wrote the highly anticipated video game adaptation of The Legend of Zelda for Sony and Nintendo, which is currently prepping production with Wes Bell directing. With all of that said, Justin, how do you feel about Derek joining the team for this one?
I feel good. I mean, he's a... obviously, he's got some history in Hollywood. I think he's been involved in some decent projects. The one I'm probably most excited about is Skull Island. I think that I could see that having some alignment with G.I. Joe, kind of in the way they, sort of the military team structure. I think that's there's certainly some crossover between that and what you might expect in a G.I. Joe film.
And in Humanoids.
My biggest shock here, I had no idea Jurassic World made $1.67 billion. That's kind of crazy.
Huge.
But yeah, I mean, I'm happy with it. I think there's a lot more to it than just the writer. I think, as I think we'd all agree, in G.I. Joe Retaliation, for instance, the writing team on that, and I'm going to get the names wrong, but it's a pair of writers, the same pair of writers that have written the Deadpool movies, which we all know are remarkably successful, amazing films that everybody loves. But Retaliation does not fall into that same category. So I think it's great to have a good team of writers or a good writer involved, but I think ultimately it's going to rely on sort of the actors, the story, the directing, there's many different elements that go into it. And I think we all understand, especially me as a writer, I can imagine sort of, as the producers and as Hollywood and the studio kind of gets their fingers in the project, that can kind of sometimes have different results. So, I mean, at the end of the day, he's got some history. He's not some guy off the street. He pretty much, he knows what he's doing based on his resume. So I think it's a good thing.
With like the movies we've had so far, like with, we've had the issue where the writing hasn't been very good. And we've been in positions where we've been looking at certain films with what I think is pretty decent casting, and the writing just wasn't there to kind of like reinforce that and build a foundation, basically. So this is a positive move, in my opinion. But I mean, would you like to see more writers involved in this particular process for this particular film?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting, there's a thin line between sort of being able to have multiple viewpoints, a lot of people fleshing out ideas, a writer's room, so to speak, and having too many cooks in the kitchen. So I think, I don't think it's bad to have, more than one writer involved, kind of providing ideas. I mean, TV series generally always have writers' rooms where they've got a number of different writers that are kind of all putting their ideas on the table. And maybe there's something similar here too. So I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think it's going to be a challenge. There's inherently difficulty kind of with people getting their heads around what G.I. Joe is, especially in modern days. So the writers kind of try to get it, but they don't really get it. And I think part of the problem is you've got such starkly different continuities, so to speak, where you had the Sunbow cartoon, which was so goofy and so crazy and outlandish, but is also the biggest point of media that most common people are familiar with. And then you've got the comic, which could tend to be somewhat harder and more serious and more violent and more adult. And there isn't a whole lot of commonality between the two. So people who kind of try to touch both sides of the coin inherently don't do a good job of doing either. So I think G.I. Joe as a concept is very difficult for people who aren't fully immersed in it to really comprehend and understand. And that definitely has shown through in the writing previously. I mean, Rise of Cobra was, which wasn't a terrible movie, but it didn't really know what it wanted to do. Retaliation, I kind of think the same way. It wasn't really sure what it was supposed to be. So yeah, I think I would agree there has been challenges with the writing in the past, and I'm not sure if more people being involved would solve those problems or not. But my hope is that we can kind of get back to basics and maybe, based on sort of what I've seen from Skybound and what we're seeing from Classified, maybe there's a possibility for more grounded sort of framework around G.I. Joe that the producers and the filmmakers can be convinced that sort of approach would work.
I can't for one second imagine that the Skybound success, whether it be the almost 4 million earned from the G.I. Joe reprints effectively, and their actual Energon crossover universe isn't being looked at by people like Derek Connolly here, who is, you imagine is going to be doing some research before doing this particular taking this job on, this role on. He may be quite versed in it. He may be one of those like underground fans from back in the day. But yeah, this is the thing. Like, it'd be interesting to see, how he approaches this in terms of the writing and the story. And it would be interesting as well to start, because we're going to be hearing little bits more as this is developing. We're going to start hearing story elements slipping out. So it's going to be interesting to keep our ears open for that particular information.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they could kind of lift the Skybound universe and just film it, and it would work pretty well. I don't know if it would work so well for a G.I. Joe / Transformers combination feature, but it would certainly work to a certain degree for G.I. Joe specifically, because as we've seen from Skybound, the Transformers elements are kind of around the periphery, but they're not really deeply embedded within the G.I. Joe comic series yet. But I think from a high level concept, if they could just kind of lift and shift that from comic page to film, that would be a good first start.
I think the problem they have here is, you're right, there's two different perspectives you could go from, but they're not going to be going from the G.I. Joe perspective, are they? They're going to be going from the Transformers perspective.
Absolutely.
And it makes sense because there are previous movies that this is going to effectively tie into with the end of the Rise of the Beasts and what have you. But what I would say is, I think it would be a better film if it was the G.I. Joe perspective and the Transformers coming into the universe in this kind of subtle, scary, mysterious way, where there's nothing known about them, and then all of a sudden they're both having to deal with each other, and you're seeing that kind of the hints throughout the beginning of the film as they're kind of trickling in about Transformers, and like how it's been done in the Duke series, because the fact that it's like he had one experience that he's like, whoa, and then it's like you don't see anything after that. It's just him chasing what is this, this unicorn, like he's trying to work out what's going on. And that would have been a brilliant film. The problem is we're in a position where Transformers are fully already in this universe. Everyone knows about them. Everyone knows what to expect. So that mystery and dangerous element aspect is kind of removed, isn't it?
That's a very good point. Yeah, because that's one of the things that I really like about it. What they're doing with Skybound is sort of that slow burn of Transformers elements throughout the real world universe. But yeah, it's far too late for that in the film, because Transformers are a known commodity at this point and are kind of known by the masses. So you can't really retcon that unless they were going to spin this off into a wholly different kind of universe. But that kind of defeats the purpose of using Transformers as a springboard for GI Joe. You know, if you kind of spin this into its own thing, then you kind of lose some of that. You know, in a way, they could always sort of, you know, set it back in time and kind of do what they've done with some of these other things, where it's kind of a pseudo prequel / reboot sort of situation.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, they could do that, but considering, you know, Rise of the Beast sort of already sprinkled GI Joe in there, it's be difficult for them to kind of retrofit it around that at this point.
They could go close to the end of that movie though, couldn't they? They could kind of like go into like the 90s basically. So we're straight in there with Eco Warriors, with with Mega Marines. All that stuff is just happening. Neon. That'd be fine. That'd go down really well with the fans.
Oh, Joe fans would love it. Yeah, they'd love it. Just bring your sunglasses in the movie theater, because that's going to get pretty bright.
It's going to be toxic in there in way more ways than one. Right then. So that's Derek Connolly. Excited about this, actually. I was desperately wanted to talk to you about it. Again, being a writer and obviously, you know, some of these films like Jurassic World, I'm really impressed with. I love Jurassic World.
Sure.
Dominion was rubbish, but he wasn't involved in that, so I'll let him off. But yeah, like I'm very hopeful that we can get something pretty cool out of this. In any case, we've got more news to talk about. With the Transformers 1 movie on the way, star Chris Hemsworth and producer Lorenzo de Bonaventura showed up for SDCC to discuss the movie and a lot more, as it turned out, with LDB in the driver's seat for the upcoming G.I. Joe Transformers crossover movie and Chris Hemsworth rumoured to be on the cards to feature in the film. It's no surprise that a lot of questions during their panel and promotional tour centred around the Joes and the robots in disguise coming together. Mr. de Bonaventura had the following to say regarding the huge cast of characters they could be dealing with. We are definitely in the process of figuring out how to integrate G.I. Joe and Transformers. We're in the creative process. We really have not discovered the key to that yet, because one of the difficulties with it is there are so many characters that you feel you have to service, and when you do that, you never really deliver any good characters. So the trick here is to figure out how do you combine these two worlds with the least number of people or robots. That's where it's a big trick that we're trying to figure out, so we're working with that. He also went on to say, we do intend to bring back G.I. Joe as standalone. We've created a complication for ourselves because we just did the Transformers 1 animated movie, and to our wonder and to our real happiness, because there are no human characters in the animated movie, the characters of the robots are so much more sophisticated around it. They cost too much in live action, so we're always trying to figure out how few words we can get from that, whereas the animation is all the same. So we've set a third problem for ourselves here, which is now the audience would be disappointed if we return to the same level of characterization we've had up to now. So Justin, thoughts on LDB's statements? Do you agree with him regarding the characterization issues here?
You know, it's fascinating. I've never really heard it phrased in that way before, where they
poorly.
Yeah. You know, oh, it's so expensive to make them talk, we can't really give them personalities. You know, I mean, that's kind of that's a take. You know, that's an interesting way to think about it. Never really wrapped my head around that before.
No.
It's fascinating to hear him say sort of, oh, there's no humans in Transformers 1 and people still love it. It's like, yeah, you know, people have been telling him that for 20 years, you know, ever since the first movie came out. It's like, you know, you don't need to focus on the humans so much. Just do a better job making the Transformers characters actual characters. So I mean, that's the interesting thing, is that you know, he's starting, it seems like at least he's realizing stuff that we've known for a long time. But it's kind of gotten into a situation because, you know, now they've got this potentially, and Transformers 1 hasn't been released yet, although we're hearing very, very positive buzz from early screenings, so there's no way to know how well it's going to do yet.
That's true.
But the possibility is that, like, what if Transformers 1 comes out and just absolutely knocks the doors off and catapults the brand back to $1 billion franchise, and all of a sudden they're like, well, geez, you know, do we do these live action movies, or is it better to kind of build on this animated feature? You know, so I mean, it's a good problem to have, I suppose, if they got multiple different avenues with which they can launch or relaunch the brand in that way. But it does add some complications because he's now all of a sudden, right when they're about to introduce the humans we actually want to see, is saying, well, geez, maybe we don't need humans after all. So I think that's intriguing. And with G.I. Joe, it's always been an issue with characters. I mean, you're never going to feature the character all the characters everybody wants to see. It's just not going to happen. You can't, even if they did like an Avengers Endgame kind of big, massive end battle with 30 different people, there's going to be a guy who raises his hand and said, well, what about this guy? He was my favorite and he didn't show up anywhere.
What about Sea Spray? Why isn't Sea Spray in it? Why isn't Warpath in it?
So you're never going to cover all the bases, but I think he's making a mountain out of a molehill. I think people would accept a smaller cast as long as it's done well. Totally. I don't think people are going to flip their desk and storm out if Alpine's not in it. I mean, I think what they're going to do is they're going to get mad if Duke is in it and he's, and it's a bad characterization. I mean, that's really the big thing. I think if you can take a small cast of characters and give them depth, people will overlook sort of a lot of the frustrations. I think you can get around the fact, there's too many characters and just kind of throw up your hands. I mean, with Transformers, it's been one frustration after another where, it's not the fact that there's too many characters or that it's too expensive to make them, to give them personalities, which, I won't even get into that, but the personalities they choose don't match the characters. I mean, there seems to be this perception that we just throw a car in there and call him Mirage and we're good to go. We throw, a truck in there and call him Ironhide and nobody will care. Even if he doesn't actually represent this character that everybody knows is known as Ironhide for, 40 years. So, I mean, it's not
to that point. Optimus Prime ripping people's heads off and cutting, threatening Grimlock by saying, I'm going to cut your head off and kill all your mates if you don't join us.
That has nothing to do with how expensive it is to animate something or to make his mouth move. I mean, in that case, it's almost worse because you are taking advantage of his mouth moving and making him say these terrible things that are completely out of character. So, I mean, I really do not agree with his viewpoint as far as, kind of the cop-out where people don't care about the Transformers characters because we can't make them talk a lot. I mean, that's BS. It's ridiculous. Yeah. I think there's ways around that. Pretty effective ways around that. Where if you had a capable writer and people really knew what they were talking about, they would be able to adapt a story effectively without breaking the bank. And I don't know. I really don't know where he's coming from, and I'm kind of concerned because he is already spouting this long list of mea culpas even before the first footage has been filmed. It's like he's already thinking of excuses why this might not work before they're even starting the project, and that just does not set a good precedent in my mind.
No, I have to agree. I think it's annoying because I feel like if you get what you put into it, really, you get out what you put into it. And you're not going to just get a $1 billion franchise if you're cutting corners left, right, and center. Speculate to accumulate, basically, in this case. And I feel like if they do put the emphasis on the important foundations of this film, then I think it will be successful. I think it's got all the hallmarks to be successful. Sure. Transformers and G.I. Joe are going through the G.I. Joe especially, the G.I. Joe brand is going through an amazing period of time right now.
Oh, yeah.
It's incredible. It really is at probably the highest notoriety it's been for the longest time.
Very long time.
We've had moments where there's been some really cool things, but it's been very much part in only really in around the fandom. It hasn't really broken beyond that of about 10 to 15,000 people. And now we're talking it's on a much bigger stage. People are aware of this. People are talking about it. People are excited about this. People keep questioning Chris Hemsworth and Lorenzo de Bonaventura about it.
Exactly.
So it's should we capitalize on this rather than just sit back and go, well, it's difficult. We've got to do it. Just do it. Get the writers in. Get the people involved in, get decent I mean, if Chris Hemsworth's involved, that straight away, that is a bonus. That's a positive. Yes,
definitely.
That is a net positive if we can get him. But he'll probably be the voice of Prime, in all honesty, will he not? Is that not what he's going to be? It seems a bit obvious to me.
It does for sure. I mean, that's what he's doing in Transformers One. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who are faithful to Peter Weller, who they should be.
Cullen.
Oh,
Yeah.
Cullen, sorry, Peter Cullen. I got him mixed up. But yeah, Peter Cullen got him mixed up with RoboCop, don't
Could
I?
you imagine?
Peter Cullen,
Freedom.
yeah.
Freedom is the right of all sentient beings.
Freedom is my prime directive. Yeah, it's but
Optimus
yeah, I mean,
Prime directives, amazing.
he's getting a little older, and I think, and I don't know. I mean, maybe he's wanting to dial back, how
Yeah.
involved he is, a little bit. So I think maybe it makes sense to get Chris Hemsworth in there.
I'm happy. Honestly, I will say Chris Hemsworth as a Joe character, and he could double. There was two. Well, should we get onto that little next
Yeah,
section?
yeah.
That
Let's talk about that.
Chris
Yeah.
was talking about, because I call him Chris because we're quite close.
Oh yeah. All you Chris's got to stick together, right?
I know, like we're I'll message him afterwards and let him know. As well as LDB, Chris Hemsworth had a lot to say regarding his possible involvement in the movie. He replied, "I don't know yet," Hemsworth admitted. "I keep getting asked about that. Producer Lorenzo de Bonaventura had brought it up when I was recording this film, and we started talking about the way where the universe could expand and how fun it could be. And look, I'm just down for great filmmakers, great scripts, great stories. There's a whole lot of potential in this universe, in both the G.I. Joe world and the Transformers world, to recreate, try something different." Let's break this down into sections and talk about each one, Justin. So this particular kind of thing he's talked about here, obviously he's had this conversation with Lorenzo de Bonaventura whilst recording Transformers 1.
Mhm.
But this is, even though he's talking about this very nonchalantly and chill and cash, he seems quite up for this.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, he certainly seems interested, especially if they can get a good story and good people involved. I think that's great. Yeah, I mean, he certainly does have a positive edge to the way he's talking about it. Yeah.
I'm going to say one thing here, Extraction. And I'm going to say
Yeah.
another thing here, Extraction 2.
Yeah.
Both of which are phenomenal movies. And I would say Extraction 2 has probably the best action sequence I have ever seen in a film ever. When they escape that
Oh yeah.
prison and they get on that train, and I mean that whole series in one shot, I know it's not literally one shot, but it is
Right.
filmed in that style, is probably the best thing I've ever seen in a film in my life, in an action film anyway.
And that kind of goes back to sort of what we were saying earlier, because I think Chris Hemsworth gets a lot of credit in that film, but would his presence in that film have been as effective with the different writer, different cinematographers? I mean, it was the filmmaking of that sequence that really made that sequence.
Yeah,
No offense to Chris Hemsworth. I mean, he's
he was
great.
all right
I
in
love
that
him,
bit, yeah.
but he's a guy firing a gun and running around and doing his stuff, and he looks great doing it. But I think you also have to surround these actors with quality people, because I think we'll all agree. Henry Golding's a good actor. I mean, there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with Henry Golding at all. What they did for the cinematography and the production of the Snake Eyes movie just completely eliminated any potential ability he might have had to elevate that production with his acting skills. I mean, that's it's a little bit of a shame, because I think that's why you really have to take these really great tentpole actors and you've got to put the right crew around them and the right writer and the right director, and you can't just kind of throw random folks at the screen and expect it to produce something decent. So I think Extraction and Extraction 2 are the perfect examples of that. And I
Imagine, if you will, Justin, right? An escape from a prison with the G.I. Joe team being pursued by Transformers in not a prison, but like a certain area, right? They're escaping and evading, and they're being chased by, you've got like Starscream and Thundercracker and Skywarp coming in and shooting at them and transforming and shooting at them, flying away. And you're on Astro Train at the end.
That'd be amazing. I mean, there's a potential to do some really cool things with this franchise, but they've got to be dedicated to it. They've got to find the right people who can do that, and who aren't just like, if you put G.I. Joe and Transformers on it, it'll make $600 million. I mean, they've got to really be committed to the story they want to tell, and that's really what has elevated like the MCU so much, and what many people might say has been sort of its downfall recently, where in the early days, it was small, they were dedicated to making good films, and it expanded to what it is now. And some folks might argue that now they're just kind of coasting on the Marvel brand,
Yeah.
and quality has kind of suffered a little bit. And I don't agree with everybody who kind of talks negatively about the quality now, but I think we've got to get to that mindset where let's focus a lot of resources on making a good small form film, and perhaps it will grow into something bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just kind of excited at the thought of, G.I. Joe and Transformers doing something a little bit more cohesive, a little bit
Yes.
more like not serious, but like as in they take it more seriously rather than just like you say, throw things at it to see what happens, sort of thing.
Yep.
And this is definitely feeling more positive just hearing Chris
Sure.
Hemsworth talking about it, honestly. But yeah, no, I think he'd be great. And again, I do feel like he'd probably be more in line to do Prime, but I would personally love to see him as a Joe, and I'd love to see Cullen come back to do the voice of Prime, because I
Hmm.
feel like Hemsworth's voice as Prime in Transformers One is purely about the fact that he's a younger
Yeah, for sure.
Prime. Do you know what I mean? It's a younger kind of character.
Yeah, I would love it if Cullen did the voice of Prime in this GI Joe movie, and Chris Hemsworth was just a Joe character. I mean, I think that'd be great, and in a way, I would almost prefer that approach. I think just have him focus on being that Joe character and not so much worried about this double duty.
Yeah. Who's Double Duty?
Heavy Duty's cousin.
It's a double blast and heavy duty combo.
Yeah, there you go.
If roadblock, heavy duty, double blast, and all got together,
Yeah,
it'd be the same person anyway, pretty much.
yeah,
Pretty much the
exactly.
same character. Anyway, now, as well as that, he also mentioned we've had early conversations about it, and about what the world has to offer. And I think there's some really fun opportunities to expand the universe. Nothing official yet. It's been in early creative discussions, but who knows? We'll see. I love this experience. I loved working with Lorenzo de Bonaventura and Paramount. I worked with Paramount years ago, but Lorenzo I've known for a lot of years, and he's just such a great creative partner. If Hemsworth does get cast in the crossover, he doesn't know what character he would play, or if he would maybe pull double duty. There you go. I'm not even sure. He said about a potential role. I was like, am I going to be like talking to myself? Am I going to be playing Optimus Prime and then switch over to G.I. Joe? Do I get paid twice? What's happening here? That's the important question. His humor coming out massively here.
Definitely.
And I think if he does do two characters, yes, mate, pay him as much as he bloody wants and pay him twice on this one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I won't pretend to know how those logistics work with finance if somebody plays multiple different characters.
Yeah.
But yeah, do whatever you need to do. I think he's a guy that could kind of carry the film. Put it on his shoulders. Similarly to how people kind of expected The Rock to do with Retaliation. And I think people would say, well, that didn't work out too well. And I kind of disagree. I mean, I think Retaliation. I don't know exactly how much money it made. I don't know, $400 million internationally, 500 million maybe. That might be overshooting it. I think it only made like 250 domestically, but I think a lot of that was based on The Rock's presence in the film, and I think if he wasn't involved in that movie, it would probably have done even worse. So I think I could see them leaning on Hemsworth to do that. And not only is he a decent actor with good visibility, he's a very positive guy. He's a great guy. You see all sorts of different interviews with him and stuff. He's always joking around. He's got a great attitude. Doesn't take himself too seriously, but does seem at least somewhat dedicated to the craft. I've heard him some interviews in regards to Thor: Love and Thunder, where he kind of was disappointed with how he portrayed the character in that film and really wants to kind of get back to basics. And I know people will kind of joke about some of the more recent personifications of Thor and be like, well, he's kind of slipped a little. But I recently watched kind of a few MCU films in a row, including Infinity War, and it's just like his characterization in Infinity War is just some of the best Marvel characterizations that I have seen throughout the entirety of the MCU. I mean, he just really, really put some depth and richness into that Thor character. He made me care about Thor for the first time in however many years I've been a comic fan. So I think he's got the chops to kind of do that depth of acting and that characterization that perhaps hasn't been fully explored in some of the more recent Thor films, but I think he did a really great job with it.
Absolutely. Like I said, yeah, very excited for this. And again, if we can see Chris Hemsworth as even as a G.I. Joe character, that would be phenomenal. Anyway, we've got one more story to get stuck into. It's not all positivity and rainbows. However, the story emerged from the INSNEIDER last Monday that highlighted an alleged explosive and racially charged clash between Lorenzo de Bonaventura and Stephen Caple Jr. after the director had turned down LDB's offer to direct the crossover movie. I will preface by saying that this is currently all hearsay, as both camps have denied any racist language was used, stating that it was a heated negotiation that went south, but according to the article, some of Lorenzo de Bonaventura's comments were racially tinged. The main crux of the issue was that LDB suggested that Stephen Caple Jr. should be more grateful for the opportunity to direct the big budget crossover movie. In any case, Stephen Caple Jr. has walked away from the project and somebody else will need to step into that spot. But who? Firstly, Justin, never a good thing to hear this sort of news, but how much stock do you put into this, and do you think we should be respectful of both parties playing this down?
Yeah, I mean, whenever you hear stories like this with two distinctly different sides, it tends to fall somewhere in the middle. It's tough to say because Lorenzo has been very public about the fact that they don't want to do a hooded Cobra Commander because it reminds too many people of the Ku Klux Klan, which I'm not going to get into the depth of that right now. But right. So on the surface, it would seem like he's sensitive to marginalized populations, and he's not wouldn't go down that road. But you never know. I mean, I have my own issues with LDB. I'm not going to say that he's a racist or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, I Hollywood is a tough business, and I could definitely see a heated conversation going down that path. And I wasn't there, and
that's the problem, isn't it? Like, we don't know what's been said technically, so we're just reporting on it because the story is out there. That's effectively all we're talking about here. And
I would say, somebody like Stephen Caple Jr., who seemed very invested in GI. He claims, bringing GI Joe into the Transformers world was kind of his idea, his baby. He seemed very invested in it. For him to walk away, you would think, not only from that combination that he kind of gave birth to, but also you got to think a decent payday. If for him to walk away from that, you'd think it had to be kind of a pretty serious issue. Although maybe it was just they didn't want to pay him as much as he wanted, and things just got a little heated. So yeah, we don't know the truth of it. I'm not a big fan of LDB, so automatically I'm probably going to lean on the wrong side of whatever he claims, but that's my own personal issue, and I'm not going to claim that I know anything that I don't know.
Yeah, that is the way to approach this one, I think. Even in the article, he says he's not suggesting that de Bonaventura is racist or anything like that.
Sure.
But he thinks we are all guilty of microaggressions and things like that from time to time. From what I've been told by several different parties, it certainly sounds like that's what happened here at the very least. So again, I think it's one of those things where, like you say, we have issues with LDB in general. This wasn't on the list, and hopefully isn't the case. And hopefully this is just one of those things where, the two parties can have an amicable kind of like maybe, end situation here. Now, if it does turn out that this is the case and Stephen Caple Jr. is maybe like weighing up his options in terms of what to do about this scenario, that's a different story altogether. But obviously we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it. And if nothing comes of this, then I don't think we should be all out there kind of like waving pitchforks at the guy just yet. Especially for this, for maybe other things, yes.
got plenty of reasons to wave pitchforks around, but we probably don't need to add this to the list quite yet. Yeah.
In any case, we needed to cover it. It was in the ether. What do you guys think in the comments? Of course, let us know all your thoughts on all the stories, from Derek Connolly joining as a writer to Chris Hemsworth and LDB comments, of course, and of course this bit of a nasty kind of end, but there you go. Anyway, right then, Justin, thank you very much, buddy, for joining me for this movie news burst roundup. Hope you've had a good time.
Definitely. Yeah, it's good to talk to you again. I always like talking about this stuff. It forces me to think about really what I'm looking for in a G.I. Joe Transformers movie, and I always just appreciate chatting with you.
Absolutely, mate. And we've probably got a lot more to come now. It seems to be really ramping up. Yeah, can't wait to see more of this. Anyway, thanks very much, dude. That's it for this installment of the Full Force Movie News Burst. Thank you to my awesome co-host, Justin Bell. See you next time. And as always, after 3, 1, 2, 3.
Full force.
Laters. That's it for this instalment of the Full Force Movie News Burst. Don't forget to comment, like and subscribe. See you next time, and as always, full force. Make sure you get involved with the discussion by liking, sharing and commenting on these videos, and as always you can keep up with the show after listening by following on X, formerly Twitter, @TheFullForce, liking the Facebook page, facebook.com/TheFullForce. We've also added a brand new Instagram, so check us out there as well @TheFullForce Podcast, and if you would like to contact the show you can message us on any of those platforms with feedback and questions. We also have a Patreon page, so if you want to show your support for the show, see your name up in lights on these videos, or enjoy exclusive bonus content, then check out patreon.com/TheFullForce Podcast, or click on the link on any of the posts this podcast appears in. Full Force.